One of the most infamous and feared political enforcers of all time was the Tivoli Gardens strongman, Claudius Massop.
Teach them! Always make sure the message reach them!
Born Claudius Massop on the 16th of April 1949 in the West Kingston community of Denham Town, Massop became the leader and the strongman of the Phoenix Gang, which was later renamed the Shower Posse, based in Tivoli Gardens, with influence on Wellington Street, Rima, Denham Town, and other areas of West Kingston. Massop, who was also called Jack, spent his early life reportedly engaged in petty criminal activities, mostly as a street hustler and pimp. By the time he was 18 years old, he was already the acknowledged leader of what would later become known as the infamous Shower Posse, a gang that was later headed by the notorious Lester Lloyd Cook, more popularly known as Jim Brown. In 1976, a state of emergency was called by then Prime Minister Michael Manley in the face of rising political tension. Supporters of then opposition leader Edward Seaga's Jamaica Labour Party and Manley's PNP were engaged in a bloody political struggle, which began before the 1976 election and ended after the JLP won the 1980 election, a feud which famously produced more than 800 deaths. While the violent political atmosphere had its genesis in conflicts between the parties from as early as the beginning of the two-party system in the 1940s, political violence spiraled out of control in the 1970s. 500 persons, including Massop and other prominent members of the Jamaica Labour Party, among them present government ministers Pernell Charles and Olivia Babsy Grange, were accused of trying to overthrow the government and were detained, without charges, in the specially created Gun Court Detention Center at the Up Park Camp military headquarters. Massop was released when the state of emergency was lifted in January of 1977. At the time, he was 29 years old and immediately became the top henchman in his home base of Tivoli Gardens. Massop had risen through the ranks of the criminal underworld to become one of the most feared men in Western Kingston. Police records show that Massop had a long history of run-ins with the law. He was arrested on several counts of murder, illegal possession of firearm, shooting with intent, driving without a driver's license, and perjury, but none of those charges produced any convictions. In Tivoli Gardens, Massop was known to be a tough enforcer who was not afraid to discipline anyone who fell out of line, and is remembered for a strict, no-nonsense attitude. One elderly woman who claimed to have lived in Tivoli at the time of his reign in the criminal underworld described Massop as an easygoing individual who never went out of his way to harm anyone. He was a nice person who anyone could approach, but he did not take kindly to rapists and petty thieves and dealt with them rough, the woman said. He was the one who set the real order and discipline in Tivoli Gardens. Claudie Massop was also our protector, and he defended the community from attack from our enemies in Matthews Lane and other PNP areas. However, one former cop described Massop as a heartless killer whose political connection sometimes rendered police officers powerless to apprehend him. That man was no saint, said the ex-cop. There are many who have felt his heavy hand and have suffered terrible human losses as a result. I was a constable at the time and was part of a patrol that came under heavy gunfire in the section of West Kingston where he reigned. In those days, rifles and submachine guns were just getting into the wrong hands, and we did not have the bulletproof vests or such big guns. We did not see who was actually firing at us. We got intelligence afterward that it was Massop and his cronies. One of the cops in the patrol wet his pants. But as time passed and Massop matured, he made moves to organize a peace initiative between Tivoli Gardens and the hotbed of Matthews Lane, which was then ruled by PNP enforcer Aston Bucky Marshall Thompson. As leaders of the two respective communities, both men organized meetings and negotiated a truce, which became official on the 9th of January 1978, when Massop and Marshall met at the intersection of Oxford and Beeston Streets, the official line of demarcation between both communities, and signed a peace treaty. They both renounced political violence and called on their supporters to put away their guns and channel their energies into building their communities. After the signing of the peace treaty, street dances, which were often the targets of vicious gun attacks, were held without incidents in sections of the volatile constituency. Both enforcers were also responsible for organizing the famous One Love Peace concert, which featured Bob Marley and the Wailers, and a host of other reggae acts at the National Stadium in April of 1978. In a fascinating twist of fate, Claudie and Bucky Marshall found themselves sharing a Kingston prison cell. Although sworn political enemies at the time, the two somehow found common ground, agreeing that the violence was destroying their communities. Once out of jail, Massop, who knew Bob Marley from his Trenchtown days, flew to London to make him an offer he could not refuse, and he did not. In February of 1978, Marley was back in Jamaica, some 18 months after he had left in the wake of a still unexplained assassination attempt that had left him wounded. It was Marley's first performance in Jamaica since he embarked on a self-imposed exile after narrowly escaping with his life following the gun attack at his Hope Road-based home. During the much publicized peace concert at the National Stadium, Massop and Marshall were called up on stage by the late Jacob Miller in a symbolic peace gesture. Marley also brought the house down when he invited Manley and Siaga on stage in a historic move to call for peace between warring political factions. 8 months after the successful staging of the peace concert, Massop's life was snuffed out by police officers at the age of 31. Massop, a 21-year-old racehorse trainer named Lloyd Fraser, also called Nolan of a Tivoli Gardens address, and Alphonso Trevor Tinson, also known as Hindu, a Jamaican who was living in Canada, were killed by a large contingent of heavily armed policemen on the evening of February 4, 1979, at the corner of Industrial Terrace and Marcus Garvey Drive, following a car chase after leaving a football match in Spanish Town involving the Tivoli Gardens Football Club. Massop died after he was shot at least 40 times, this according to Jamaican newspaper reports. A reported 15,000 persons attended Massop's funeral in West Kingston.
Teach them! Hey, yo, hello! Send the message and make it reach them. It's teach them. Right here, Warlord representing.
Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment below. Remember to like and share the video. Don't forget to subscribe for more awesome content. Follow me on social media and check out the suggested videos on screen. This is Teach saying, until next time, walk good, my friends.